Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie comic interview. It's your host, Cody, Gotham's Caped Crusader, and we are here with our good friend, Jeff Zanelotti. Did I get it right?
You did.
Yes, let's go. I'm gonna be honest. When my man presented me with the correct pronunciation of his last name, I was intimidated, but we've been hitting it on all cylinders. So, Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you doing? Give us a little bit of a breakdown of who you are, Zed Comics Originals, and just everything that is going into your brand.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. As you know, I'm a big fan of your show. Been listening to it for quite a while now. Consistently impressed. No problem. You earned it, man. The level of interviews you have, the quality of the people you have on the show is inspiring and also maybe a little bit intimidating. So this is a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. But like you said, my name is Jeff Zanelotti. I'm an independent comics creator from Long Island, New York. I created the brand Zed Comics Original in 2020, so pretty new. When I published a one-shot called the Troublemakers for Free Comic Book Day. Ever since then, I've been working on kind of building and enhancing the brand. The current work in progress is a book I'm really proud of called Accidental Renegades. The Kickstarter is in pre-production now, but really looking forward to telling a story that I think is interesting and personal and fun all at the same time.
Yeah, man, and dude, first and foremost, I gotta give special shout out, Army vet as well as a teacher. So
yeah.
Putting that work in, serving the country and, helping our children, man. So big shout out to that. That's definitely something I can really appreciate. How was it transitioning? We were talking about it earlier, but how was it transitioning from, being enlisted to working on a comic? How much of that did you take and evolve into a script or put into your books? And I mean, were you working on any of your comics during your enlistment?
No. I actually graduated from high school. I'm kind of dating myself here, but in 1992, directly went to West Point, spent 4 years in college, graduated from West Point in 1996, and then pretty much became a commissioned officer in the Army. After that, did about 20 years. So from 1996 to 2016 was in the Army, all over the world, had some incredible opportunities. Comics have always been a huge part of my life. I can remember being interviewed for the middle school newspaper in the local comic book store.
Dude, let's go.
Because that's where we met. And back then, some of your older listeners will know that back then comics were not like they are now. Like, you weren't actively representing that you were a comics fan. You kind of kept that quiet because you were going to get bullied, but it was something that I loved. I was passionate about. I can still remember the first book that my dad brought home when I was sick one day. He must have picked up at the train station in Manhattan, and it was a copy of Ant-Man. And I was like, man, this stuff's cool. This stuff's really, really cool. So I'd always been interested in drawing. It's always been something I've done in creating my own stories. And one thing about Zed Comics is, the stories are just, it's a one-person show. They're created, written, plotted, drawn, inked, covered, lettered, all by me. It's that has its pros and cons, but that's kind of how it works.
So,
and I think...
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, being a one-man show, I mean, how does that, I guess, work for you? I mean, it sounds like it could be pretty strenuous. Not only having a script, but also design all the panels. I mean, the artwork is gorgeous, by the way. The previews I've been able to see, I really enjoy the models and just everything that you've sent. And if you guys are interested, that is all flashing down on the panel. For our audio listeners, you can check this out on Facebook and YouTube. We'll have a post-production video edited, a little bit cleaned up. So you could check out the visuals on that. But yeah, both the Troublemakers and the Accidental Renegades, I mean, just the art style is just phenomenal. So do those comics have any connection with one another?
Actually, they kind of do. And it all started from a seed where, I had a lead character that was interesting to me that I really wanted to employ. That character became kind of the central character in the Troublemakers. And with the Troublemakers, the whole concept of that was that it was a world where an internship exists for people with the potential to be exceptional supervillains. So like you would have an X-Men or an Avengers Academy in the Marvel world, this is the opposite. This is a place where people can learn to be supervillains. Okay. And the idea is that they're trying to unseat the status quo by being as good as they can be at being bad. And that's where the idea of the Troublemakers came from. And then it kind of inspires the fact, well, what brings someone to try to do something like that? The tagline being that no one is the villain in their own story. When you tell a story, you're never the bad guy in it. It's always told from your perspective. And that central idea was kind of interesting to me because I thought, well, the villains are never the villains in their story. The good guys are always the villains. So let's examine that from a different perspective. And the more I worked on it, the more I felt like it was a little bit derivative of a couple things that already existed, and I didn't want that. So I talked to.
Oh, sorry. Go
ahead.
Go ahead. I was just saying that's such an interesting perception. I like when you were breaking that down, it was. That is such a crazy perception and you're right. And in your head, no matter what you do, you always try to rationalize why it's good. What led you to that?
All right. So like I said, I mean, Zed Comics was really, as an official thing, was founded in 2020. And that was kind of the height of all the things going on across the nation with Black Lives Matter and the protests and everything. And I found myself, really wanting to express my opinion, like so many other people. I felt very strongly about what was going on, and I wanted to voice that. And I spent too much time while on COVID quarantine. As a teacher, we weren't in the building. We were doing everything virtual. There was a lot of free time. And I found myself getting into heated debates with people on social media, which anyone with a brain in their head can tell you has never changed anyone's mind.
Yeah.
You can argue on social media for days, and you're never really going to change anyone's mind. It became very frustrating. So I kind of promised myself that every time I wanted to argue with someone, I was just going to sit down and I was going to draw. I was going to create something. Like I was going to use that as my catalyst to produce something positive.
That's awesome, dude.
I went online. I bought a digital tablet. I kind of jumped into digital art because I felt like it was a good transition for me to be a little bit more quicker, especially if I'm doing everything myself. Digital art, once you kind of get used to it, does speed up your process a little bit. And I frankly need that as a one-person show. And I just started saying, okay, well, let's look at what's going on in the world. If I had the superpower, how would I try to affect change? And how would I be viewed in that capacity? And in many ways, you would be viewed as a villain. So I took that and said, okay, well, now let's look at this from the next step, which is there's an organization that builds that capacity, that trains and teaches and mentors young people to be what needs to be changed. And that's kind of where the Troublemakers came from. And decided to try to get it on Free Comic Book Day for 2020. I kind of got a gift in that it got extended because of COVID out into August. That gave me a little bit of time. And to kind of get back to your earlier question about how the military experience helped, one of the hardest things about that was that there was a deadline. That Free Comic Book Day was coming no matter whether I was ready or not.
Yeah.
And I had to get the book out. And working with a printer, which was out of my control, and kind of, what the military will call a backwards plan. Like you start with Free Comic Book Day and you go backwards to where you are now and figure out when you have to hit milestones. At least having that, a certain amount of discipline and a very supportive family and, an end state really kind of helped me get there. Was able to get the book out into, I think, 6 local comic shops all over Long Island, so kind of spread it out a little bit.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
No, it was great. It was awesome. I mean, to go in and see your book on the shelf, even if you kind of made it happen, it wasn't,
So was you the self-publisher as well?
Yeah. Well, I went through Mixam Publishing, but that was everything up to that point, and that was a great lesson. That's a great company, and they're really, really fast.
So what? Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, if anything, they were too fast because they overestimated and said that it would be like, I'd say 2 weeks until they could have the books on the shelf. So I planned off of that. And so when that 2-week mark hit, it was, this book is as good as this book is going to be because I have to get it to the printer.
Yeah.
I would love to redo this panel. I would love to change this person's face, but I can't make my deadline if I do that. So it's gotta go. And then the 2 weeks, they had it out in the mail in like 72 hours. They were awesome. Fast that I was like, if I would have known you were that fast, I could have waited. I could have pushed it a couple of days and gotten more work done. It's a good problem to have, but I was like, man, this company's almost too efficient. Yeah. No complaints.
What did you learn? I mean, that was your first time doing anything like this. Like, what experiences did you learn going and doing this? I mean, I'm sure you took something away from it.
Well, I took a lot away. One of the things that I definitely took away is the importance of having a schedule. Again, I don't know if this is the military in me or if I'm just naturally, a schedule type person, but everything needed to get done by a certain time. So I had a chart that said, okay, the pencils are done on this day, the inks, I worked in all grayscale. So I had the screen tones, I had the grayscales. I didn't color the interior of the book. That is just not a skill of mine. I only colored the covers because, one, it's just not something I'm good at. My hat is off to those colorists. That is a difficult job. And also, it's a very time-consuming process that I just didn't have the time for. So I'm hugely inspired by manga. I love manga, and I kind of took that aesthetic and ran with it, and it kind of has infiltrated into all my work, that manga aesthetic. but it also allowed me to work in grayscale, which keeps me away from some of my areas that I would just eat way too much time on. So staying on schedule was a huge lesson that I learned. And I think the other lesson is, I mean, I hate to say this because it just sounds so easy, but just sit your ass down and work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I had this kind of epiphany when everything was going on. And I know a lot of people during COVID had their own epiphanies, but mine was that, you know, I'm going to be 47. And I'm either going to be 47 years old with a comic book to my name, or I'm going to be 47 years old without a comic book to my name. But one way or another, God willing, I'm crossing that threshold. So at the very least, I can have my, you know, something in my hands that at least prove that I did it. So
how's that feel?
I did that.
That you have that.
It felt pretty good. You know, it still does. Like I look at the picture, and you know, going to my local comic shop and having, you know, Bailey's Comics in Lindenhurst, New York, and having the owner Trung, who I've known for a long time, kind of say like, hey, that's your stuff right there. People are asking about it. You know, that was something else. But every time I look at it, I just cringe. And I think like every creative does that. I'm sure you probably listen to some of the earlier podcasts where you're like, I sounded like an idiot. Like I look at a couple panels, I'm like, I wish I could go back in time and redo this. You know, we have the books, we're flipping through it. I edited, I proofread, I did all that stuff. And as a teacher, this chaps me, but my son's flipping through, he goes, hey Dad, I think I caught a typo. And I look at him I'm like, you sure did? I forgot a period. And I had checked that thing like 4 times. So that's going to live on and on, you know? So when I tell my students, triple check your work, it's coming from a place of experience, because I double checked it and something snuck by. So, but just being able to have it is, you know, is great. And I'm trying to chase that with the next one, taking the lessons that I've learned with the first one and trying to make it even better. And with each subsequent issue, it's got this long charted out, you know, plan, taking that and trying to get a little bit better each time.
So with your first book, you mentioned that they were mentoring people to be villains and everything. Would you say that some of your teaching experience kind of like bled into that, you know, like with you being like a mentor to your students?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, it kind of came from, part of it was, I thought about being a school, but I'm sure you're familiar with My Hero Academia. You know, a school for villains is just too much of a blatant ripoff of a very popular, you know, and something I really enjoy. So I didn't want to do that. My son at the time was doing an internship, and I thought, well, an internship, that like it can be a business. It makes sense. It, you know, it makes a lot of sense. And then there were, and if I ever go back to it, there are threads that would connect later on about where the financing for the internship comes from and what the purpose of the internship is. And, you know, it crossed over into so many things that part of the problem with being slow is you have a great idea and you're germinating on it for so long, and then The Boys comes out and it has a lot of things that sound kind of like you were going to do anyway, but it beat you to it. So there were a few things that it was a great idea. I felt like it was too derivative of other things, and I wanted to tell my own story, something that I came up with.
Is it hard for you to like for me, I'm a perfectionist with things. Like sometimes it takes forever to come out with something. Like, do you ever suffer with any of that during this, being not only the writer but the artist as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you where I really suffer is, you know, again, I'm not the fastest person around. I have a full-time job. I have a family that does eat a lot of time, as you fully understand.
Yeah.
But what I find is the more I draw, like anyone will tell you, the better I get. So, you know, some of my original character designs were based on my particular talent when that design was made. Now I feel that I'm better with anatomy or perspective. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to have this design. I can redesign this character and make him or her look twice as cool. But now it's back to the drawing board. And I'm like, I have to break myself of the habit of constantly trying to go back and fix old ideas and realize that some of these ideas are good and they need to continue to be worked. You know, not everything needs to be redone just because you got a new idea. And that's personally, as kind of a perfectionist, where, you know, I'll spend weeks working on, you know, an eye that someone's probably only going to take about 30 seconds to look at, if even that. Oh
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of that is just hardwired into our brains, because you notice it. You notice it every time you look at it, but they never really do. Let's start breaking down Accidental Renegades, issue number 1.
Okay.
So what are we looking at in terms of protagonists, in terms of antagonist? Because it's kind of weird. I mean, it sounds like a protagonist is trying to be a villain that's trying to be good. So I mean, where are we at with the story, and I guess you know, just characters in general?
Okay, well, the first issue is you know, it's pretty much completely scripted out, all of it, and it's being worked, you know, on the page now. But it's an introductory issue. Obviously, as issue 1, it sets up the world, it sets up the characters, but not yet all of them. Obviously, there's going to be opportunities to bring new members in as we kind of go. So the team is basically led by, and this kind of is where the military experience comes into. The team is led by a former military officer who kind of represents the feeling of committing yourself to something so entirely to kind of feel later on that maybe you weren't quite treated with the respect you deserved.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a frustration that a lot of veterans have. I think it's a universal thing with everything that they've given in service of their country, only to feel like when they asked for anything, they were told to get back, get in the back of the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a universal frustration that whether, someone served for 5 years or someone served for 25 years, I feel like that level of frustration is a common frustration. So he sort of represents that in me. The feeling that you worked so hard, but what for what? And then to feel like when you needed something, you were abandoned, and that is his driving force is to try to make amends for what he did.
Absolutely.
So he's the leader of this.
Oh, I was gonna. Sorry. We had Inferno Training Center. Jill saying, "Go Jeff" in the chat.
Oh, all right. Hey, what's up, Jill?
So sorry about interrupting you. Go
oh no, it's okay. No, hey Jill, keep up the good work. I think that's a universal thing, and I see it from the hundreds of soldiers that I've served with in my career. How frustrated you get. So he represents that part of me, and I always have kind of leaned and really felt like I gravitated more towards team books because I really do like the group dynamic. I studied sociology in college, and that was one of the things that I love is the way group dynamics shape the way the group moves. And I see that as a teacher. 3 classes of freshman students are completely different just based on the presence or absence of 1 or 2 people, just based on the way that the group responds. And that to me has always been fascinating from a sociological perspective. But each member of the team, I think, kind of represents a facet of me as the creator. So Spitfire, who would be the leader of the team, is that. Another person on the team is Eclipse. He's an alien, and what he basically represents, I think, is the sense of just overall frustration with the world at large. His story is.
What was the inspiration for his design, though? I mean, his design's very intriguing, compared to the first character. So, I mean, what was your ideas and everything to shape that character?
Well, you talk about Eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, now Eclipse changed like 15 times. I wish I could show you some of the originals. Like he was basically like this wiry, muscly looking dude. And then I was like, you know what? No, he needs to be a slob. Like he needs to be the slob, but he's a slob for a reason. So he's a little bit older. He's got the scraggly beard. He's got the long hair. He is not built like a superhero. He's kind of portly. He that's his thing. But he's also, he's an alcoholic, which I am not, but what he represents is he's drinking because of the problems that he has. And his specific problems is that he is the, well, I don't want to get too much into it, but he is he's kind of like a biracial alien. So he's the product of 2 different alien races. And in this society that has been deemed illegal. So, his existence, like he's trying to serve it, live in a world where his existence is considered illegal. And that is not unfortunately meant to be ripped from the headlines, but that's kind of where we're at right now is that, he's trying to overturn a system that told him he should not even be there. And because of that, because of what he's seen, because of what he's done, he's the last person in his race. He has kind of turned to alcohol. So, while that is not something I've personally struggled with, I have seen friends who have, and that kind of will tie back to his motivation. He's not an alcoholic for the sake of being a joke.
So what drove
that's his personality.
What drove you to have him deal with his products with that? I mean, because the thing is, I suffered from being an alcoholic. I can be 100% honest with it, but almost celebrating 2 years sober. So, pretty excited about that. But alcohol is definitely one of those things where it's easy to run into. It's easy to get sucked into because it's like a poison. Once it grips you, it just holds you. And you think your answer is you can like run away and just like kind of just forget about the world. What was your choice with choosing that?
Honestly, I don't like perfect characters. Like I like my characters to be flawed. I like them to be human. Even though this one's an alien, to have human problems. One thing that I feel like I try to bring to my writing is a sense that with the exception of maybe the fact that he's a pointy-eared alien with 3 fingers, that he's just like a lot of people you may know. And for the record, congratulations on 2 years, man. Keep that up. That's awesome.
Thank you.
but he's a flawed person. He has problems, and he deals with them. Spitfire is a flawed person. These are not, for lack of a better word, these are not Supermen. These are people who are struggling with real problems and don't have necessarily the way to solve it immediately, which is why they try and they fail. And, they stumble upwards and they fail upwards, but they fail. I don't like characters who are going to win every time.
Yeah.
And they're not going to win every time. That's, in the first issue, they're encountering problems, and, they may or may not get through them, but they're not going to win every time. And having characters that are flawed, I think, makes them relatable, makes them interesting.
Absolutely.
And also allows for character growth, which is pretty important.
So is it hard? I mean, writing about such, and a lot of the times, the reason why we're all so as divided is because, a lot of us are ignorant to it. But is it hard to write about these issues, and not lose yourself within it? Because earlier you were saying a lot of the times you were drawing these while arguing with people online. Do you find yourself, I guess, treading that line carefully, or how do you go about it?
I think it's careful treading, but I also think that the frustration is universal regardless of your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think so. Instead of saying this is right and this is wrong, and these people are bad and these people are good, is saying this is a frustration that we all feel. One of the things that is going to kind of be under the surface in Accidental Renegades is the role of media and their version of social media, because they become kind of cult heroes, but they become cult heroes through an underground information network and through a media, misinformation campaign. No matter what side of the aisle you sit on, you can relate to that. I mean, everyone feels that there's a certain, lean to the news, regardless of what news channel you put on. Yeah. So rather than sitting here and saying, these people are the villains, it's saying, this is the thing, this is the idea that they're rebelling against. You decide whether or not you think they're villains. And some people are going to look at it and say, well, clearly the what's called the collective government, they're not that bad. And other people are going to say, well, clearly the renegades are doing the wrong thing. And that's the type of discussion that I want to generate. You figure it out.
Yeah, that's deep. That is such a, and it's the more that we're talking and the more I'm putting the pieces together as you connect them for me, it's just, you were talking about earlier how a lot of times when you argue with people, arguing with them is not the way to get them to learn. And the way now we're diving and delving into, how your book is setting up a similar undertone premise to that. It's phenomenal to see how intricate this is, dude. Holy crap, I have to give you kudos because it sounds like it's not in your face, but it's enough for you to pick up on and to relate to. And I think that's really important with books, is having, something for the audience to relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, at least I hope that this is that. And I'm not telling anyone, I know it's not my goal. There are things I believe, and I feel like any author, that's going to kind of come through in the work.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be a sledgehammer. I don't want to say you're bad, you're good. It's getting people to look at things differently. And it's kind of interesting because, I think it was Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, who said that basically nothing about me is original. I'm the sum component of everyone I've ever met. And I think that your perspective is kind of based on your experiences. One thing that I tried very, very hard to do, not a little bit in Troublemakers, but definitely in Accidental Renegades, is to have no main character, with the exception of the antagonist, who looks like me. The main characters are,
You made the antagonist look like you?
Well, it looked like me in the fact that he's the only white male character. Not that he looks like me. He doesn't. He doesn't look like. He's the only white male antagonist, at least in the first issue. There'll be other characters, but an African American male, an Indian woman, an alien, an Asian man, those are the, at least in the first few pages of the first issue, those are the ones you're introduced to. So
have you dealt with any backlash? I mean, I personally am about it, but I'm sure there's people out there who are going to have a pickle with it or might try to cause up a fuss.
I mean, maybe, and you know what? That's fine. If people are talking about it, at least they're talking about it.
Yeah,
there's a value in well, not even that, but there's a value in the debate. If you want to hate me or whatever, but what I would say is, and this is kind of based on my experiences, I grew up in a town that was very largely white. That's just the demographic of the town I grew up in. It was a great town. I love it, whatever. And then I went off to college and I went to the military, where there is a ton of diversity. The military is great for being diverse. And you work very closely with people from every creed and color and state, and it breaks you of your stereotypes pretty quickly. I also spent my time as a military officer, so that still is a historically very white male, straight male, dominated population of the military. After that, I did a year in corporate America, and then I went and I just, got a teaching job in a school that is about 99% minority, so it's almost entirely in the district Black and Hispanic. And I didn't understand the importance of representation. At least I thought I did, but I didn't, until I saw with my own eyes, like the way these young kids responded to the Black Panther movie, and the way they responded to Miles Morales, and the way they responded to Zoe Kravitz in the Batman. They respond, and it's something I took for granted. And I know a lot of people like to turn their noses up at this sort of thing, but my perspective changed in those moments, because I saw these kids saying that this is a leading Marvel superhero in a multi-million-dollar movie who looks like me, who can be me. I can be that, And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to create a comic book, make it representative of the people that don't always get representation. I just, more than it upsetting people, thank you, and more than it upsetting people, I just don't want to talk too much with my voice. So I'm trying to listen, especially to the kids in my classroom, and trying to get a feel for what they're doing, because it does lend a credibility to it.
Has any of them got a chance to see any of your work?
They saw the Troublemakers. I actually had a couple issues I gave them. A few of them follow me on social media, which is always, or at least the Zed Comics on social media, which is always pretty interesting. And every so often, like a student will come and say, hey, where are we at with this? And I'll tell them, just, this is, I would love to be doing it right now, man, but I'm teaching you. So, my day job is getting in the way of my night job.
Yeah, no, I got you.
But they do know, to some degree. But yeah, I mean, these kids are reading some of the best manga on a weekly basis that's ever been published. So it's a tough act to follow.
How's your experience though? When you started teaching, was that hard to break into? In a school where most 90% of the schools are minorities, and being, the upfront focused teacher, have you experienced a lot of trouble with that?
No, I mean, this is going on my 5th year now, so it probably took a couple years to get comfortable in my own skin as a teacher. Standing in front of a group of teenagers is, its own challenge.
What grade do you do?
I'm in high school, so it's 9th through 12th.
Ooh,
so it's great. It's great, and I don't know if any of them are listening or ever going to listen, but my kids are genuinely great. I'm fortunate in in having the students that I have, because they're supportive. They're great. For the most part, they're in it to try to do their best and to try to learn. And every day is a challenge in its own way, but I feel like, I guess it kind of comes from my military experiences. If you're genuine and you're going to just treat people with respect, it will take some time, but eventually they'll learn what you're about. Yeah. And, if you're a crappy person, doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or an engineer or a doctor, you're a crappy person. But if you're a good person, it doesn't matter if you're a teacher or an engineer or a doctor, you're still at least going to have that grounding as a decent person.
No, I think you're definitely hitting it on the spot. In my experience with what I do, that's exactly the type of model I try to find. I try to treat everyone, regardless of your size, regardless of your publications, with the same respect. You treat the janitor with the same respect as you treat the CEO.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that really pays off dividends, not only just for your brand and what you do, just as a person. People look at you in a better light than they do people who are brash and, I guess, more negative. Maybe not brash, but just more negative in the sphere. So how has your experience been, just breaking into indie comics? You always wanted to do this. This was your hurrah, you're going to do it. How's it been actually doing it, breaking into it, transitioning from Free Comic Book Day to actually just doing something where you have a first issue now? How's that experience been?
It's been really, really educational, actually. And it's been frustrating in its own way, sort of intimidating, but it's also been really educational. I've been paying a lot of attention to Kickstarters. I've been actively backing Kickstarters, doing a little bit on Indiegogo and trying to work with some independent creators to see how they're doing it. And now, like I said, it was time to finally pull the trigger, on my own. So that's in pre-launch phase. The Free Comic Book Day stuff was great because it taught me how to meet a deadline and how to create a comic that was worth getting on the shelves. Got some pretty good feedback from a few people. Got a very nice email from a pro who happened to catch his, and said it was, gave some positive reviews, which is, if I could print it and put it on the wall, I would, because it's the only fan mail I've ever gotten. But it's been really educational as far as getting the book out on time. The next step is actually figuring out how to create the brand, and I think that's where I'm at right now. Is the book, the follow-on book, creating chapters, creating arcs, and actually telling a long-term story.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Zed Comics is now. We got the free comic book day thing out, and that was great, and I was able to do that. But now, what's the next challenge? So you move on from one thing to the next, and now that I've met that goal, now it's a new goal that I'm trying to meet, which is creating an actual series.
What does your series look like? I mean, how many issues do you currently have planned?
I've got about, at least in the planning stage, probably about 4 arcs, each arc being about 3 to 4 issues long. And each arc is designed to kind of give a little bit of background on each main character. The idea being that, you meet these characters, for lack of a better word, in medias res, like they're in the middle of things when we are introduced to them. Mm-hmm. So how did they get where they are? So there will be, each arc will focus on providing a little bit more background, again, on one of, at least right now, the 4 major characters. So there are 4 arcs, each arc expecting to have anywhere from 3 to 4 chapters, depending on how many pages they are. The long-term plan is that can be all collected in essentially like an omnibus that can essentially be like, the first phase of the Accidental Renegades.
Okay, all right, I got you. How many are you looking at? A couple phases as well?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely have a plan to get to the end, but we'll go one chapter at a time to see how long it's going to take to get there.
No, absolutely, dude. That's I always love hearing that. You were talking about how you were planting the seeds that could be tied for further things, earlier, and just to hear that you have all these arcs and different plans. What's too much for you though? Like, I guess, where do you see yourself finally drawing that line? If you had to put a number, like issue wise,
I would say maybe like let's just say a 24, 25 issue series.
Yeah, that's a healthy
I feel
number.
like that. Yeah, I feel like that's good. That's collectible, in enough, as you start looking at further crowdfunding and being able to offer tiers with collections and hardcovers and things like that, which I am not at now. My current crowdfunding is very basic, and it's basic by design. Because I want to dip my toe, and I don't want to overshoot. But the long-term plan is that this, if it goes as intended, it could be a much longer term, a little bit of a larger story set in a kind of a world building that has some depth to it.
Yeah. So before we jump in, and by the way, guys, we're going to be getting an exclusive look at the campaign. Why did you choose? You chose Kickstarter, right? Why did you choose Kickstarter over Indiegogo? What I led you to go that direction?
Basically, it was 6 one way, half dozen with me. And I basically had just a lot of the people I follow were on Kickstarter. A lot of the comics that I looked at were on Kickstarter, and I have backed comics on Indiegogo, and I just happen to have backed more comics on Kickstarter. For me, it is purely a 6 one way, half dozen the other. That it would be like saying, well, why did you go with this printing company instead of that printing company? It's like, well, at the end of the day, I just went with the one that fit my needs better. And
I'm sure hearing about it more made you more comfortable with it.
And like I said, the amount of time I spent on Kickstarter, looking at it, backing books, spending time on YouTube channels, kind of learning about Kickstarter, I just felt, for me personally, I was more comfortable with Kickstarter. I'm actively toying with the idea of maybe doing something differently on Indiegogo, if for no other reason than to be able to compare the two, crowdfunding sites and see which one works better. But from everything I've done so far, I just have more of a comfortability with Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I mean, I asked because it's one of those things where I know a little bit, but the more I ask, the more I'm going to know. As far as I know, I think Kickstarter maybe takes a little bit more of a cut. But that's about it in terms of, I guess, like why to choose a different platform. But I'm always interested,
Yeah, and I know that the rules for fulfillment and the rules for how to collect are different on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. But like I said, I mean, and this is not a slight on Indiegogo at all. I just don't have the experience that I have with Kickstarter. Yeah. And for the first one, I'm not really comfortable leaving too much to chance. I wanted to go with the source that I felt a little bit more comfortable with it. I felt like I could navigate it more easily.
So, hey, you said you wanted to give us a look at that campaign. If you want to go ahead and add it to your screen, you start taking a look at it, breaking down different tiers. Once again, when is this expected to go live?
Its live date is supposed to be right now in July. And I'll have to pull that up real quick if I can do that. Okay, yeah. So this is the Kickstarter. Like I said, we're currently in pre-production or pre-launch. Kickstarter says it should be approved if all goes well for pre-launch on the 11th. And then I'm going to continue to do some work. I set the start date for being July because I feel like it's not fair to launch a Kickstarter without at least several pages, 5 to 6 pages done. And I want to be able to get that done. I actually use a technique that I learned on a different podcast called the Slack method, which is instead of attacking one page at a time, you attack a panel at a time. So if you're feeling, this panel on page 5, you'll do that. And then if the next day you're feeling like a different panel, but it's on page 22, well, that's okay. You go do that. The good news with that is that it keeps you fresh. It keeps you motivated. It helps you to work on the panels that you're feeling
That's
that
actually,
day.
yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a great system. And the bad news is, though, it makes it harder to produce a completed page because you kind of jump all over the place.
Yeah.
So if someone were like, oh, well, let me see the book, I could show you like 10 panels that I'm really proud of, but they don't necessarily sequentially tell a story yet. So that's part of the reason why I pushed it out to July.
Yeah, another cool thing about doing it in July, though, that gives you more than enough time to get information out, to get this book shown to people. From what I've learned from interviewing just multiple people, like a lot of people have a lot of great success because they're able to promote their campaign, a month to 2 months before it even drops and get a bunch of backers right off the rip.
Right. Yeah. And everything I've read is, under promise, over deliver. As much time as you think you need, give yourself more. So I've definitely been kind of using that as my planning method.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where we're at right now. Obviously, we have not gone into launch just yet, so we're still working on it. But it kind of tells the story. And if you wanted the elevator pitch, this is kind of it. It puts the fun and dysfunctional. It's a group of bumbling superpowered mercenaries who make ends meet, going from one misadventure to another, and they wind up as the unexpected figureheads for a global revolution. So you're talking about a group of people that want to stay off the government's radar, and how can they do that when everyone knows who they are? And that's kind of the story. Try to put a little bit of humor into it. I don't know if this is going to make it through the Kickstarter review, but it's the bastard child of a Quentin Tarantino threesome with one piece in the A-team while tripping on mushrooms. It's meant to be frenetic. It's meant to be a little bit crazy, but it's got that team aspect. It's got that family aspect. And it's got that idea that, this is a group of people who don't always make good decisions, but at least try to do it for the right reasons.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And then as far as the tiers, $7 or more, we call that the Digital Renegade. That's just a digital copy of issue number 1. $20 or more is what's called the Official Renegade. You get the digital copy as well. You get a signed copy of issue number 1. And there'll be a thanks or an appreciation page in the book where all the backers will have their names printed in there as well.
Oh,
that's the Official Renegade. And then the third is what's called the Exceptional Renegade. This is the top tier. It's all the things from the previous tiers. It's the digital copy. It's the signed copy. It's your name and the appreciation. And then with that comes a character sketch that I'll do of one of the main characters from the book. So in addition to the book and the signed copy and the digital copy, there's also a hand-drawn custom sketch that comes with that. I've got a couple ideas for sketch goals. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Now I've got a couple stretch goal ideas. Got some stickers planned. Got some bookmarks. Maybe wraparound cover, things like that. But like I said, with this one, I don't want to become a victim of my own excitement. I want to kind of make it manageable and then be able to fulfill. And if the stretch goals are met, to be able to fulfill even more. Instead of shooting for the moon only to come up short, and now you have to start with that as the first
So are these all the tiers you're offering
right now? Yeah, and I could go back and add more, but like I said, I'm not looking to try to get too crazy, because I want to make sure that everyone who takes advantage of this gets exactly what they want without it being an issue.
I was gonna add, I was in a Spaces on Twitter earlier, and I heard a really interesting thing that people have done and have seen success where they didn't think it was gonna happen. Adding like an ad space for maybe $50, $75, $100, where someone can get like an ad space on the back cover, or in the middle of the book, or in the back, on the back. That could be something that you could put, if someone gets it, they get it. If they don't, they don't. But if they get it, that's an additional $50, $75.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I thought about it too. And one thing I kind of thought about that didn't quite get in here is the idea that if you want not necessarily yourself drawn in the book as a character, but if you want your logo or your name because a lot of this, at least the first issue, takes place in a fairly large, kind of dystopian city, with the graffiti of being able to open the book and say, oh, that's my logo on that page, or that's my name, in graffiti on that wall in the background. So that is something else that I was kind of toying with.
Man, don't tempt me, because that sounds like something right up my alleyway.
Well, oh yeah, no, it'd be perfect for you. You'd probably, you have a double page spread.
So let's go ahead. We'll go right back to just the two windows of us, unless there's anything else you want to touch base on with this.
No, like I said, I mean, I'm really excited about it. I'm trying not to get too aggressive, just like the starts with a free comic book day issue, then moving on to an actual comic book series. With the first Kickstarter, I didn't want to go too crazy. I want to be able to meet these goals and keep the backers happy, and whatever stretch goals I can meet would be great. And then from there, start to with each new step, get a little bit more aggressive.
So after taking a look at the Kickstarter and learning everything that we can, what would you like to tell my listeners and viewers about your book? Why should they, when it comes live, why should they back it? And what could they look forward to with the future of Accidental Renegades?
Okay, well, that's a great question, and I would say, it's a tough market out there because there's so many great creators putting out so many great things, and every time I go on Kickstarter, I want to back more books, but I think if you're looking for a book that makes you laugh, you can find that. If you're looking for a book that examines real world issues in a fictional setting, I think you can find that too. If you're looking for a book that's full of kinetic action and excitement, you can find that as well. But if you're looking for a book that has all three of those things, you can find it with the Accidental Renegades.
Hey, there you go.
It's the type of book. Thank you. It's the type of book that you'll find enjoyable. It will challenge you, and with any luck, it will stick with you for a little bit after you put it down. And I think if you're able to do that, that's a great thing. I think being able to contribute to that as a Kickstarter, is a great investment of your time and your money, not just to the idea of independent comics, but to the idea of independent comics that are designed to do more than just entertain.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So what was some of your reasoning with the pricing for the tiers? You said it was $7 for the digital and $20 for the physical.
Yeah, and I was kind of looking at it from a perspective of the cost points as far as what it's going to cost me to produce, and again, doing everything myself. Part of that is the fairly significant amount of time that goes into the writing, the drawing, the coloring, the covers, the inking, the gray tones, all that stuff is a pretty substantial, amount of time. And then to have to get it out and do the fulfillment as a one-person show, I felt like that was, a fair price point. I compared it to a lot of other Kickstarter pricing that I've seen. And I would look at some and say, oh, wow, well, that person's asking for a lot more money. And then you read it, it's like, oh, okay, well, he's offering this, that, and the other thing, and I'm not able to produce that, so I'm not going to ask for that kind of money. So I think for, what is projected to be, potentially a 38-page issue,
Ooh,
the price points
that's
are
pretty hefty, yeah.
Yeah, I got it to like 32, and I'm like, it doesn't tell the story I need to tell, and I can't tell this story in issue 2. So you know what? If you're self-publishing,
and to be honest,
add a couple pages.
And to be honest, when I'm reading a comic, I don't care about that page number in particular. I care about the story, and as long as you're maintaining that action and that momentum with the story, it could be 100 pages, and I would read it. There's definitely been books that I've read that I average 20-25 on a typical book.
Yeah.
But there's definitely been books that have been like 60, and I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel any fatigue running through it, because the story has that momentum with it.
Right. Yeah. And I aim for this to be one of those books that when you turn that last page, you're like, God damn it, it's the last page. I want the reader to want another page. That's the best books I've read are the ones that you almost feel a sense of disappointment when you turn. You're like, oh shit, it's over. I gotta wait till the next issue to figure out where this goes. That's the goal that we're aiming for. So,
man, I really appreciate you coming on and just breaking everything down. I know this is your first official Kickstarter, but it definitely sounds like, with your one book under your belt, you have some experience. You're swinging on all fronts, and I think you're going to absolutely kill it just from the way we've talked and the way you've set things up. It's so structurally sound. Now we've come to one of my favorite parts, and you said you've watched me, so I'm sure you've already heard this a billion times, but man, I got to ask you too, because you definitely seem like just firing on all cylinders with it. If there's someone really struggling to get their book off the ground or get their idea to paper, what advice would you like to offer them as someone who is just doing their very first Kickstarter? What would you say to someone who, has been, I'm sure, in your shoes before?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to say, but it's so hard to do. But it's just do it. Just start doing it. And like I said, you know, I didn't do my first comic till I was 47 years old, but I've been a fan of comics for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And the only reason I started when I was 47 years old is because I literally sat down and I started doing it. And it's never going to be perfect. That's the one piece of advice I would give anyone who's listening is if you're waiting for your work to be perfect, it's never going to be. But being perfect and telling a story your way are not necessarily do not necessarily need to be hand in hand.
Yeah.
You can tell a perfect story imperfectly, and if you can do that, there's no reason to wait to be perfect because you're never going to be. So what I would say is it's easier said than done. I'm not one of those guys that's like, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you'll be able to do it, because I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
But I also know that it is never going to start unless you sit down and you just start doing it. I'm fortunate that as a one-man show, I don't need to find a collaborator, and that has its own downsides, but the only reason I did it, the only reason I was able to do it is because one day I just got tired of saying I was going to do it tomorrow, and I just decided to start doing it.
Absolutely. What awesome piece of advice. Once again, guys, big shout out to Jeff for coming on here, breaking down Accidental Renegades. I hope to have you on for issue number 2.
I look forward to it.
Let's go. Yeah, let's go. Issue number 2. Let's line that up. Big shout out once again, everybody in the chat. Leave a comment down below letting me know your favorite parts of this episode. We'll have this out pre-production in a few days as well. And yeah, once again, guys, I hope you have a fantastic Saturday night. But most importantly, guys, keep it geekly.